Today we are completing Mishnah 10. Let's put it on the screen for everyone. We were talking about loving work, and the second part of that Mishnah was Snois harabonut, to hate the rabbanut, which is translated here as a high position. Literally, it means the rabbinate, but it doesn't really, it's not limited to being a rabbi. It's really any position of authority. The altis vadala roshus, and do not become close to the authorities. Don't uh, don't get so close to the government is the idea. And following on what we were talking about yesterday in terms of the loving work. So yeah, a person has to be willing to do work and should not be looking at himself as saying, I'm an important person. This work is beneath my dignity, right? If a person says this work is beneath my dignity, then he's not going to end up doing an honest living sometimes. And the idea of, even if you are someone who has an authority, certainly for your own self, do not feel that the work is beneath you. You may be able to say, for my position, I can't do certain things because it's not appropriate for me as the rabbi or me as the political whatever position I'm in, or the leader. Maybe that might be, but for myself personally, I should be able to do that work. So it's a mindset. The and the Gemara quotes Rav, who said to Rav Huna that it's better for you to be someone who skins the animals, take the skins in the marketplace and earn a living, rather than saying, "Oh, look, I'm a Kohen, or I'm some other important person. I can't do those things." The Also, the Gemara brings down that an idea that authority buries its holders. This is a quote from the Gemara, that if a person is in a position of authority, there's a lot of pressure. And not only is there pressure just in terms of to produce, but all the people who are driving you crazy, right? And it creates a lot of stress. And that also is problematic. So a person has to be able to handle that. The Gemara actually says that Yosef, we're going to be reading about Yosef in the Torah readings this week, right? And he died younger than all of the other brothers. And the Gemara says because he was in a position of authority, that he was the leader. He had more pressure on him. Um, there's also a quote that the Gemara has from Rabban Gamliel, who says that to the person who he's giving authority to, he says, "I'm not granting you power, I'm granting you servitude," because the idea of being a leader in Jewish life is to serve the people. And we call it a public servant. So what happens even in the general world, right? Sometimes we lose sight of that the person who is in a leadership position, a king, even a king in Jewish law, his job is not to be the boss. His job is to take care of the people. That's his job. He's supposed to be doing for everybody else and making sure that everybody has what they need. And that's what a person in authority's job is to make sure that everybody under their care is taken care of and is thriving, and whatever their needs are being met. The Maharal actually points out another factor, which is that's not just talking about physical needs, it's also spiritual needs, and in terms of their behavior, that a person who's in a position of power, that means you're accountable for when someone else who does something that you could have stopped. If you could have prevented other people from doing things wrong, then you're responsible. In fact, there's a story that's brought down from the Chafetz Chaim that there was a person who came to him who had been convicted of, this was in Russia, or exactly, it was Latvia, wherever exactly it was, and he was convicted of tax evasion, and he was sentenced to 15 years. It must have been in Russia because he was sentenced to Siberia. So he came before he said he went. He asked if he could speak to the rabbi. So they bring to the Chafetz Chaim. He says, like, what did you want? He says, it's all your fault because you didn't correct my behavior. You didn't tell me, what that I shouldn't be cheating the authority or something like that. It's like what, here, um, it becomes you decide to do something wrong, and all of a sudden becomes the rabbi's fault because he didn't tell you not to do it, right? And that's how people think. And but on the other hand, says the Chafetz Chaim, there is an element to it that when you come when not necessarily with the authorities in the tax evasion, but in general, if it's going to come up to heaven and then they're going to say, this person did something wrong, well, who could have prevented it? And if you were one of the people who could have prevented it, then you'll be accountable for that as well. Um, Rabbi Twersky points out also that a person with low self-esteem and you put that person in a position of authority, so that's more likely they're going to abuse their position because that person wants to assert their control. Look, now that I'm a person in authority, now I can lord it over other people. I can show how big I am. When you are someone who has low self-esteem, you feel the need to show who you are more, right? So that's a problem. And on the other hand, obviously, we need people who are going to be in positions of authority because otherwise we're going to have chaos. We need people to lead. However, the mindset that we need to have is one that we're serving other people and that we want to help other people. And that's why we're doing it. We're not doing it because we enjoy the kavod and the other things that come with it. We do it because we want to help others and we want to make sure everybody else is getting what they need. The last part of the Mishnah was al tisvadala rashus, don't get close to the authorities. So Rashi and others bring down that the general concept of governments and other authorities like that is if they want to get what they need, and they're going to do things for you as long as it suits their needs, and when it doesn't, then they do what they want, and therefore they befriend people for their own needs. And I mean, it may not be the same in our democracies. It's still issues. I would say it's still there, but certainly, in the old days, it was much worse. On the other hand, the government does have the right if they want to build a road, they're not going to worry that your house is in the way. They're going to just say, look, we need to build a road there, and boom, you're misplaced. Even if they pay you, big deal. You're stuck, right? So the government definitely does what is good for the government. Rabbeinu Yonah also points out that working for the government has other challenges because when you accept and he's used the example of a king, but when you accept the authority of a king and now you're working for him, then it becomes a little, sometimes, many times, it's going to conflict with your ability to be under Hashem's rule. That they don't always match. The needs of the government and the needs of Hashem don't necessarily match, and you could end up being in a position where you're unable to keep the Torah. So that's another point he points, and also another angle in the Hebrew, it said the word rashut. The rashut it literally means permission. It's being translated here as the authorities. But if we understand that it's a play on the word of permission, so the Rav Bartanura says the government can give itself permission to do whatever it wants. Right? That's what the government's authority is. The government can make a law anytime they need a law. They pass a law and they can do whatever they want. And that also puts the individual potentially in a position where listen, today this is the law, and tomorrow the law changes all of a sudden, right? Even when it comes to taxes, right? We all of a sudden, today's news, right? Property taxes are going up, the water and sewer bill is going up, everything's going up, right? Who decided that? Not us, right? So that's how it goes. And finally, Irving Bunim points out again the idea of rishus as opposed to authority or kingship, and he says it could be also referring to a government that's not necessarily a legitimate government. Not every government is legitimate, right? So we have a legitimate government because it was voted. Sometimes you have governments that are put into power because people rebelled and took control, or some military coup or whatever it might have been. So he says history has shown that the Jewish people, we have a tendency to get involved in revolutions and movements, right? We're involved in all these things. However, unfortunately, most of the time, what happens is when that group succeeds and takes power, the Jew who was involved is not in there. He somehow got kicked out. And we end up getting turned on. And if we go through history, we certainly could see many of those situations. And ultimately, you've merely exchanged one tyranny for another. So he says the idea of rishus, therefore, could be referring to don't get involved in these movements and these illegitimate overthrows of government, because you're not going to end up getting ahead of the game. They're going to turn on you as well. And it's another approach of how to look at it. And we'll hold it there. Have a great day.